the one like with the crypto talk,
Yep.
yeah, that was a joke made at Tom Brady, but
Yeah.
somehow it was still even funnier with the fact that like what Gronk, it was like, how did you lose, Tom, like how did you lose $30 million to crypto? Like even Gronk knew that that's not real money. Like Gronk, no, this not real money. It was like
Yeah.
it's a great fucking joke.
It
Great
was.
joke. I think it's time that we go into the thing that we ultimately had the main plan on this week, which was to talk about the fantasy football quarterbacks. Nice, fun little early section to have some laughs at what happened in the
Yep.
world of sports ball here this week. But yeah, one of the things that we did talk about is kind of the deadness that is around this time in football. Again, we have like the rookie training camps, the OTAs, and that kind of stuff, but you can't really learn a whole lot from that. And fantasy football for us is something that is a very big, important part of the program or a part of the world of football. And, you know, we had our fantasy league last year that should have been yourself and myself in the final, but of course, Aiden O'Connell can't fucking learn how to hit Devontae Adams 3 times in a game, so I ended up not making it, and you
Yep.
ended up winning. But we talked a bunch about fantasy stuff last week, and so go make sure to check out that because there was a lot of good fantasy, just generalization. But we're getting into a little bit more of like the deeper conversations with this, and this week we're really going after and talking about the quarterbacks in terms of fantasy football. I know about a little bit more than a month ago, we gave our kind of power ranking for the quarterbacks in the NFL. The QB rankings in the NFL is very different to the QB rankings for fantasy. I think
Yeah.
there's only maybe one person that we would actually have the same in terms of fantasy position, in terms of where they are in the actual power rankings. And for me, that's Patrick Mahomes, because like I look at Mahomes and when he was the number one quarterback in last year's fantasy. I like
No, he wasn't. Josh Allen was.
no, I'm talking about before the draft,
Oh,
leading in.
before the draft. I
Yeah,
see. I see. I see.
yeah, and you know, in our league, of course, we always make fun of TJ because he selected Patrick Mahomes with the first overall pick, and
Yeah.
anyone who knows anything about fantasy football knows you don't select a quarterback first overall, no matter how good they just so happen to be,
Yeah.
just because they're not the highest fantasy point getters. But he was the consensus first overall guy last year, and we knew the weapons that he had going into last season. He wasn't the highest quarterback in terms of fantasy points. That was indeed Josh Allen. But
Hmm.
Mahomes, again, we talked about Rashid Rice and how he had the lottery ticket with Andy Reid, but Mahomes this year, he is getting Hollywood Brown. He is getting Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce, I think he's going to be a little bit hungrier this coming season because of him having a pretty bad year in terms of Kelce, but even then, he still almost had 1,000 receiving yards.
Well, and we got to remember he had a knee
He
injury in
did
training camp last year, and so that sort of
slowed him
set him
down a
off to
little
a
bit.
slow start. Yeah. Um. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think Kelsey will have a bit of a bounce back year this year. I believe he just signed a 2-year extension as well.
Yeah, making him the highest
Yeah.
paid tight end in the league, which he should be.
Yeah.
Like, even if he is where he is at this stage in his career, you
Yeah.
should be paying him like the highest paid tight end in the league. And I know there was rumors that he was potentially contemplating retirement as well.
I think if they had not won the Super Bowl this year, he would have retired with
It,
his brother.
yeah,
But the fact that they won and that made it 2 in a row, and he looked at it and went,
I want
"We
to be
could win
part of the
3 in a row."
three-peat,
Yeah,
the
and
only
so
team to
let's
ever
do
do it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a really good chance. But yeah, for me, like all the players that I named, I know they drafted a tight end in the third round as well, who
Yep.
looks like he could be kind of the next guy after Travis. So Mahomes, he's gonna have a lot more weapons to throw the ball to, and to me, when you give Mahomes better weapons, there is no reason he shouldn't be the first quarterback in fantasy. Granted, he's not going to get you the rushing yards that a Lamar
Mhm.
Jackson or a Jalen Hurts or a Justin Fields might get you, but he's going to make up with that with, he's going to have two or three, maybe even four 400-yard passing games with like four passing touchdowns. He might get up into the 40s for passing touchdowns and not a high level of interceptions as well. So
Yeah.
for all of those reasons, he is my number one quarterback going into this year, is because he is the best quarterback in the league. He has much better weapons around him this particular season. With Andy Reid still there,
Mhm.
all of this leads me to look at this and go, it's hard for me not to pick Patrick Mahomes.
That's fair. I'm a little more conservative on Patty Mahomes. I look at what the Chiefs did last year. Yes, they had fewer weapons. Um, but I think what they learned from that is they don't have to dominate the league all season long to still dominate in the playoffs. And I think what we're going to see from them is probably a little bit more of a conservative play style, just focusing more on preserving the health of all their players going through the season. So I do think Patrick Mahomes will have a good statistical season. But he's, for me, my number 3 ranked quarterback on this list.
Really?
Yes. So he's still in my top 3 there, but he is number 3 for me.
I'm interested to know who your number one rated quarterback. I
So
feel like I have an idea of the player, and
yeah, I'm sure you know exactly who. I expect a bit of a drop off from him this year, but I'm not sure if it's going to be as much as we think. I have Jalen Hurts as my number 1 quarterback. He just has so many weapons on offense, from Dallas Goedert to AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and
that's
my only
still super
concern,
talented offensive line.
exactly, that's the concern is the loss of Jason Kelsey.
Yeah,
Are they still going to be able to run that tush push as effectively? And so will he still get 15 rushing touchdowns next year? That I'm not so sure on. But even so, he was a close second to Josh Allen last year in total fantasy rankings, and he didn't lose everything on his team like
yeah.
Josh Allen did. So I do think Jalen Hurts is still going to put up phenomenal numbers. He was decent at protecting the ball last year. So that's why I have him as my number 1, just because I think they have more to prove as well. And so they're going to be going out there and putting up big numbers and trying to win games convincingly, especially after how last season went, where everybody was describing them as the worst best team that we saw in the league. On paper they should have been the best, but every week we were going, what is this garbage Eagles team that's out there? I think we're going to see them have a bounce back this year. And even with that poor year last year, Jalen Hurts was still number 2 on the quarterback list for points per game.
Yeah. And Jalen Hurts, to me, he was my third rated quarterback,
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons why, like what you mentioned, he still has all of those weapons. He still has a top level offensive line. I forget who their offensive coordinator is. I think it's definitely an upgrade of what they had last year. And I think it's the guy that was the OC from the Chargers last year. I'm forgetting his name here at the moment, but he's a young guy who was, he's viewed as a pretty good looking offensive minded guy. It's not Brandon Staley. It's I'm
Kellen Moore.
Kellen Moore. Thank you. Um, I like what I've seen from him in both Dallas and, granted, with the Chargers, they were just a mess last year. But for me, the reason why I have him as my third is we really saw Jalen Hurts struggle in the passing department last year, and
Yeah.
everyone knows I'm a massive fan of Jalen Hurts. Like, I've loved his story ever since he left Alabama and went to Oklahoma. I was really pulling for him to do a lot better. Um, but from what we saw with him last year in the NFL in the terms of the passing game, it definitely worried me because he really started to struggle to find some of his top level receivers like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. And without having Jason Kelsey there, which both of us agree is kind of the engine that made that tush push really work,
Hmm.
I think the rushing touchdowns are going to be massively cut down. Again, he had 15 last year. I think he might be able to get 7 this year. For me, it's just right now, I'm worried. I'm worried that he's just not going to be able to take that next step. And so for me, that's why I had him as my third. But again,
Yep.
he's still the top 3
Hmm.
in both of ours. So it still shows the value that he has.
Oh, exactly, and that's sort of what I mean. That this is going to be an interesting list just because there's a lot more personal opinions that will come
Yep.
into this one as opposed to the total top list. Um, but yeah, I think with a more solid
Seasoned.
offensive coordinator,
Yep.
offensive play caller, I think we're going to see
That
that
bounce back.
offense settle down a little bit and go back to the basics. So I think we'll see a better year out of Jalen Hurts for that. I could be wrong for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, interesting that our 1 and 3 sort of flipped, which makes me believe that our number 2 is
Is
actually
probably
the
the
only
same.
one that we have the exact same, and that is Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow.
Really? Okay, because I don't have Joe Burrow as my number 2.
Really? Okay, never
Yeah,
mind
Joe
then.
Joe Burrow on my list is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
See, and I have Joe Burrow at number 2 because yes, he was hurt last year, so we didn't see much out of him. We don't know what we don't have anything to draw from. But when he is healthy, he is the only guy that rivals Patrick Mahomes for the best quarterback in the league right now.
Yep.
And I look at that and I go, if he can stay healthy the whole season, he will put up those numbers. He's still got Jamar Chase.
Yep.
He's still got
T Higgins.
T. Higgins, and they've got a decent tight end unit now. That for me, I think if he is healthy, he will be on track to likely be one of the top 3, if not the best fantasy point getter. And if we remember last year, before that injury, he was far and away the front runner for the MVP last season.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you a lot of things there. The only reason that I have him a little bit farther down the list
Mhm.
than some of the other guys in front of him, and my number 2 guy is Lamar Jackson, because when you look at Lamar, he does put up a lot of fantasy points in terms of what he does in the passing game and the
Yep.
touchdowns, and with what he does with his legs, because one of the big problems that unfortunately happens with fantasy football rankings when it comes to quarterbacks is some of the more mobile guys, mobile
Yep.
guys in the NFL, they just rake up the fantasy points because they can essentially do the job of a running back while also putting up the stats as a quarterback. When you watch Joe Burrow play, he's a little bit more statuesque in terms of his mobility. He has fine mobility when it comes to the NFL. It's just Lamar Jackson, having Derrick Henry there, I think is really going to open up a lot of running lanes for Lamar Jackson, and he's probably going to have a pretty historic rushing year this year. I don't think his passing numbers are going to be necessarily anything great, because if we look at what Lamar Jackson did passing last year, 27 or 24 passing touchdowns, just a little shy of under 3700 passing yards, 7 TDs, but he had over 800 rushing
Yep.
yards. I think with the addition of Derrick Henry this year, that's only going to open that up more for Lamar Jackson, and I think he's easily going to have over that 1,000-yard rushing mark for the third time in his career, and he's probably going to have a bunch more rushing touchdowns.
That's
Yeah.
fair. I kind of went the other way with that on Lamar Jackson myself. I think having Derrick Henry there, he's not had a de facto number 1 running back in some time.
Mm,
And so I think what it's actually going to take some of those yards away, because what's going to happen is you're going to see them going, well, yeah, in the past it's been well, maybe I'll hand it off, maybe I'll keep it. But you got Derrick Henry now, so we need you to make sure you're handing that ball to him, because if anybody's going to get hit, we want to be him, not you. And he lost a lot in his receiving core this. this offseason. And so that's where I think his passing numbers will be down a little bit as well. I had Lamar Jackson on my list fall all the way to 9.
Really?
Yes, I
Mm.
don't think he's going to have as good of a year this year. I don't think he's going to be the MVP talk or anything like that. I do expect to see a fall. I think the rushing yards will still be there. I expect him to get probably around that 800 mark again, possibly as high as 1,000. But I think Derrick Henry is going to take some of that away, and Derrick Henry is definitely going to take any short yardage touchdown situations away.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to see as much of those play action rollout running to the corner of the end zone touchdowns for Lamar Jackson. I think it's going to be more of a I'm just going to give it to you, Derek. Go knock someone's head off and get this ball in the end zone.
For me, I'm not necessarily worrying about Lamar in the running game when it comes to short yardage. I Because Lamar Jackson, he's still one of those guys that can easily break off every single game for two like 30 to 40-yard rushes. And we
Yeah.
know he does like to, even when it is a passing play, just decides to run it anyways.
Yep.
So that for me, that is the only reason. But both logic is like your logic is very sound as well.
Hmm.
Um, the fourth quarterback on our list, I'm interested to see who you have.
My fourth quarterback is a guy who has a lot of weapons still, and that's Brock Purdy.
He was my number
He was
five.
he was number 5 last year, I believe, at the final point of the season, with how many points he put up. I think he, he's gotten better every year we've seen him so far, and I think this is the year we're really going to see what he is capable of as a starter in this league. This is going to be the season that sort of makes or breaks what he's going to do for the rest of his career, I think.
Yeah, I
And with the weapons around him and how desperate the 49ers are to finally take that next step and win a Super Bowl, um, I think we're going to see a lot of good things out of Brock Purdy. And I wanted to put him in my top 3, but with the guys I've got there, I was like, I can't justify it at this point because I don't know if he'll do that. I just think he'll do that. Whereas those other 3 guys I've got up there, I know are going to be consistent, probably 20 points per game type of players for you on your fantasy team. Brock Purdy might have a couple weeks where he's, 17, 18 instead of over 20 every week.
yeah, for me, I looked at Brock Purdy and I was kind of saying some of the similar things there as well. The fact that they drafted Ricky Parson
Yep.
Parcel in the first round, they have Debo Samuel,
Hmm.
Brandon Ayuk, and this first round rookie. He's while also still having George Kittle and that talented offensive line. He's just
And
gonna have weapon to throw to with Kyle Shanahan, who is without a doubt the second best offensive mind in
mhm,
the league, only behind Andy Reid. Like
right, and we can't forget that Christian McCaffrey is good at catching the ball out of the backfield as well. It's
that
another
he
target
is.
for him.
Yep.
Yep. And there were a lot of those big chunk plays last year were like little screen passes to Christian McCaffrey, which did count as passing yards for Brock Purdy.
Short chip pass to your running back, still a pass. Yeah, the only
Exactly.
reason I had him as my fifth guy is because the guy that I have at number 4, he got another super talented weapon, and
Mm.
that's CJ Stroud.
Yeah, and that's who I have at number 5.
Yeah,
So we just sort of flip-flopped our 4-5 here.
pretty much it was one of those situations with Brock Purdy. He got a super talented guy in the draft,
Hmm.
and with CJ Stroud, he got a super talented guy through a trade, and this guy
Yep.
just happens to be proven and one of the best receivers in the league. A little bit of a nutcase, but he still produces everywhere he goes. I don't think the Texans are worried about it as long as he's putting up the numbers, and he
Well, and the
does.
thing with Diggs that we've seen is when he goes somewhere new, year 1, he is
He's
lights
phenomenal.
out. The
Phenomenal.
problem is then he doesn't win a Super Bowl, he gets agitated and he starts being a diva in the locker room year 2 and on. That is why I think the Texans brought him in and they're like, we're going to wipe the rest of your contract off of this. We're going to have you here this year and then you can go play in Dallas.
Yeah, because last year, Stephon Diggs just shy under 1,200 yards, eight
Hmm.
TDs, for 273 fantasy points. I will say, he is going into a little bit more of a stacked room, but with the offensive coordinator that they have, and with CJ Stroud,
Yeah.
I'm not worried that they're not going to have enough mouths to feed in this room. It's still going to be a damn good situation for CJ Stroud to look at that. And yeah, again, Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud, kind of similar situations of where they're both young guys
Yeah.
and they have a lot of talent around them. Brock Purdy probably has a little bit of a better run game as opposed to what, well, we know for a fact he has a better run game with
Yeah.
CMC there. But yeah, both very interesting that we have those guys just maybe in different spots.
And really, that CJ Stroud was another one where I wanted to put him in my top three, but I wasn't not entirely sold that Diggs is going to be a savior messiah that's going to push him over that hump. I think he's going to have a phenomenal stat-driven year. Excellent rookie year last season, and so
Yes.
I fully expect him to be in the top 5 at the very least this year.
Yeah, without a doubt. And for me, I would probably have CJ Stroud in the top 3 for keepers. We're talking a lot more
Yes.
of the
Yeah,
more
this is just a 1 year type of.
yeah, but for
Yeah.
guys like CJ Stroud in this sort of instance, we will mention, their keeper values. And CJ, he's a year 2 quarterback in this league,
Hmm.
and if you're going to have a keeper draft like we are going to have in this upcoming year, this is going to be one of those guys that is probably pretty worthwhile taking because, again, he's, a top 5 guy for both of us.
Yeah.
And, if you want to go above Lamar Jackson, I could see him being the number 2 quarterback in a lot of keeper leagues just
Yeah.
because he is young, he is so talented, and it's going to be interesting to watch. I
Well,
mentioned that Joe
and
Burrow was my 7th quarterback. What about yourself?
for I think we're on 6 now actually, because that was our top 5 we just
Oh yeah,
rounded out.
yeah. Joe Burrow
Yeah.
was my 6th guy. Pardon me. Yeah.
Number 6 for me. This was tough. 6 through 10 was a little wonky for me. I think with the improvement we've seen year in and year out, I went with Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff. He's got a lot of excellent weapons. We saw him really start hitting his stride near the end of last season. Just some unfortunate bounces in the playoffs there that resulted in them not continuing on, some bad coaching decisions. I think Jared Goff is going to continue to grow. This is a guy that I remember when he first got drafted, and I wasn't doing a keeper league at that point, but he was a guy back then that I was like, I want this quarterback because I think Jared Goff is going to do great things. And he's had some ups and downs, but I think we've seen this trajectory of up every season lately, and I think it's going to keep growing. We're going to see Amon-Ra St. Brown have a big year. Sam Laporta, he's still got Jahmyr Gibbs. It's this Lions team. I think Jared Goff is going to be an excellent pickup if you can get him. And his ADP right now is
It's
around
low.
it's 91. And
Yeah.
so you're going to be able to get him as late as round 10 maybe. Honestly, I would take him as high as the 7th round if he was available for me, especially in a 2 quarterback format.
I'm definitely lower on Jared Goff because, again, with a bunch of the other guys on this list, he is probably only really going to be dangerous in terms of the passing. But
Yep.
one thing that we do see from Jared Goff is he does have weeks where he just gets a little trigger happy and he throws interception after interception after interception. He had 2 of those games against the Bears last year.
Yep.
And he's I think Jared Goff is still a very good quarterback. I think he's a very capable quarterback, but there's a part of me that has him a lot lower. He's my 14th quarterback on this list. I just look at him and I go, he's going to put up good fantasy numbers
Hmm.
throughout the year, but I just look at it in the case of he does really only have Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of the wide receiver. He does have Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, but if teams start to get a little bit more comfortable with kind of stopping this Lions offense. And we really do see when this Lions offense struggles, it
Mhm.
puts up basically no points. So it's just a matter of time for when the league finally starts to kind of figure out this Lions offense a little bit more. That has me potentially a little bit more worried with Jared Goff.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about it. I would be more worried about it if Ben Johnson had left last year at the end of the year.
Yeah, and
The
that's
fact
the
that
thing.
he's
He is
still
still
there.
there.
Yeah, I think that this offense is going to just continue what it was doing last year, and it's going to just keep clicking and rolling. I do think this division is going to be a shootout between the Lions and the Bears for who wins it.
It's gonna be really really fun to watch. But yeah, like I said earlier, 6 for me was Joe Burrow.
Yep.
7. Who do you got?
7, and so that brings me to the second part of that NFC North shootout. I have Caleb Williams as my 7th quarterback, and that was tough for me because I don't often like putting rookies in the top 10. But the situation that Caleb Williams is going into, the guys he has to throw the ball to in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze and Cole Kmet. You got DeAndre Swift out of the background, who is a receiving running back as well. And
Gerald
then,
Everett, who's a yak machine.
yeah, and then the mobility still of Caleb Williams. He is not afraid to run that ball still if he needs to, and he's got the youth, the legs to be able to do that. And so I do expect him to break every Bears rookie record this year. And in doing so, I expect him to have a big stat-driven year for fantasy football. And especially if you're doing a keeper league, Caleb Williams is a guy you should grab because you're gonna have him throwing to DJ Moore and Romo Dunze next year as well, and who knows what else.
Yeah.
So definitely, it was tough for me to do that, but I just looked at all the factors, and between the fact that I expect he'll probably get anywhere from 4 to 8 rushing touchdowns on top of I'm betting 25 to 30 passing touchdowns. And I'm projecting him around 3,500 passing yards and likely about 5 to 600 rushing yards as well. So I think he's going to be a great stat monster and somebody that you're going to get easily unless you're in a league with a Bears fan, basically, because his ADP is sitting around 105. In fact, he's like the 4th lowest ADP that I've got on my list, and I've got him all the way up at number 7. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a Bears fan in your league, you're gonna be able to get him as late as probably 9, 10, or around 9, 10, or 11. If you got a Bears fan, he's probably gonna be gone in round 4 to 6.
You will have Caleb Williams a lot higher than I have Caleb Williams, and I still think there's going to be a lot of really, really good things about Caleb. Obviously, me as a Bears fan, I'm going to be very high on him, and I am. But as a Bears fan, I'm also trying to temper expectations. Going,
Yep.
I know he is a rookie. We have seen rookie struggles at the beginning portion of the season. For me, I look at him and I go, if you had to make a choice between him and CJ Stroud at the moment, you're choosing CJ Stroud because obviously CJ Stroud
Yep.
has played. But Caleb Williams, again, in that situation, he is very, very high up. And, you know, I was kind of hoping to be the guy of going like, oh, I have him at this spot, and because I know you have struggled in the past with putting rookie quarterbacks as high up as they possibly are. But when you
Hmm.
look at the situation he is in, it
Yeah.
is really hard to not have him as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Now, granted, I think the rushing yards that you have put on his head is probably too high. I think he's going to finish the year with 2 to 300 because he is a type of guy that can get himself out of trouble and run the ball. He does not want to run the ball though. He would rather he when you watch him running around and making all these spectacular plays, he's running to extend the play to find his receiver downfield. But
Yeah.
he does have the mobility to gain a bunch of yards, and I think 2 to 300 is a little bit more of an acceptable level as opposed to
That's
that
fair.
4 to 500.
I only think that because they're going to be scramble yards when a play breaks down, and they're going to be large runs simply because that play's breaking down. because his receivers are so well covered downfield. So he's going to have a lot of open running lanes. I'm thinking Lamar Jackson style when that's happening, because everybody's so far down the field. He's going to be able to get 10, 12, 15 yards before the first defender even reaches him.
Maybe.
That's sort of where I'm looking and thinking we're going to see some of those rushing yards. They're not going to be designed runs. We're not going to see a whole lot of play action rollout that's designed for him to run. It's basically going to be he's, outside the pocket and goes, well, DJ's double covered and I don't want to throw across the field to Allen and Romo Dunze is covered by the linebacker. I'm going up the sideline. I'm doing a Patrick Mahomes and I'm getting 35 yards right here.
Yeah, with Mahomes last year, he had 389 rushing yards, and so for
Yeah,
me, that's why I say for Caleb as a rookie,
that's fair.
that's kind of why I have him as that 200 to 300 mark, just because I think with him, he's definitely gonna want to sit in the pocket a little bit more and
Yeah.
more try to use that and just hit the open receiver. I think you're gonna see a lot more quick passes from Caleb in year number one, just because
Yeah.
DJ Moore is without a doubt one of the best yards after catch receivers in the league, especially yards after contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just going to be, I'm just going to quickly throw him the ball, let him get 40 yards off of this. And then, Romo Dunze is one of the 50-50 guys, Keenan Allen from the slot. We can go on and on and on about this.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a lot more quick passes we're going to see
That's
this
fair.
year than what may be expected. You're still going to see the magician that he is when it's going to be like, okay, the play's breaking down. He moves up in the pocket, then he moves back, then he moves left, then he moves right, then he's doing figure eights, and then he's going to throw the ball for 60 yards to Romo Dunze for an easy touchdown, and everyone's just going to watch that on repeat, for the next week on Sports Center type situation. Like, you're going to see
Yeah.
that.
I
But
just think he's going to have a tougher time with that because, again, this is the NFL. This
yep.
isn't college. I don't think he's not going to have time to move up and move back and move left and move right and do his little pirouettes and all that. He's going to have time to make one or two moves, and then he's either going to have to throw the ball away or use his legs.
Yeah, and
That's
again, there's still a lot of stuff that
oh
needs to
yeah.
be seen from him in the NFL. He hasn't taken
Oh,
a snap of live reps yet. So again, for
well,
me, that's kind of why I have him a little bit lower. But yes,
that's
the
fair.
the point that you brought up of if
Yeah.
you have a Bears fan in your league and you want Caleb Williams, you are probably going to have to overdraft him because a Bears fan like myself, I'm not going to say what round I'm really potentially thinking of drafting him because I know you. I know that
Yep.
you are going to be one of those guys that's just going to go he, fuck you.
Well, especially since we're talking about doing a keeper league here with our one IQ crew. So yeah, he is going to be high up on my list for sure. But yeah, this was bizarre for me because I don't often put rookie quarterbacks in here because we don't know what we're going to get. And even that, looking at my list, like year 1 and year 2 quarterbacks, even like
It's tough.
I've already listed both of mine. I don't have any other year 2 quarterback on my list. Um, it, it's just something I need to see it first to really be confident in what we're going to get. Those two guys that I've listed in Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud, that is purely because of the talent they have around them.
Yeah.
That is why I've got them not only on my list, but in my top 10 because there are so many weapons for them to utilize, and the margin for error for them as a result has shrunk so small. They can just get the ball out quick to guys like Diggs, Allen, Moore, and they'll all be able to be successful that way as long as they mitigate the mistakes they make.
Yeah. And very, very interesting. But yeah, again, I had Caleb Williams as my 13th ranked player just on this list, just because, again, some of the guys that I have ahead of him are, again, more proven in the NFL. And again, I know where I'm going to be taking Caleb, or where I have my idea of taking Caleb Williams in our keeper league, because again, Caleb Williams is one of those guys where if you're looking at quarterbacks for not just this year, but for
Yep.
future years, it probably goes CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams as your 1-2.
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes is one of those guys where you might be willing to miss him to get one of these guys for this particular season, but have them be as good. Because Caleb Williams, the two comparisons that he had coming out of college was Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. If he turns out to be one of those two guys, Well, guess what? He's going to be one of the best fantasy quarterbacks for years and years and years and years. So, again, Caleb Williams, if you're in a keeper league, this should be one of your top quarterbacks to potentially target above some of the other guys that we have previously stated, just simply because he's going to have that ability to just get better and better and better and put up more fantasy points.
Yep.
Um, Number 7 was
For
Caleb
you.
Williams, and for me, I had Josh Allen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
so where Josh Allen is in the ADP, he currently is kind of rated as 17. So
Yeah.
round 2, he's rated as the first quarterback. This is kind of one of those first moments where I'm like, if you see Josh Allen in round 2 and you are considering taking him, I highly suggest you think otherwise, whether it's a keeper league or it's an individual league, simply for the fact of he is he had lost a ton of weapons.
Yeah.
He has a rookie wide receiver in Keon Coleman. I looked at Coleman and said he's a raw receiver.
Yeah.
He is a project type guy. He's very good. Don't get me wrong. I've loved what I saw from him, but the offensive line is pretty much just going to be a lot of new faces. The only other guy that I really have faith in for Josh Allen to throw the ball to is Dalton Kincaid. And Dalton Kincaid is pretty much going to be the main target this
Hmm.
first year of Keon Coleman until Josh properly trusts Coleman, which I think even is going to take time. Like for the first half of the season, it's going to be like, okay, like we need to, you're like, okay, like let's.
Yeah.
Josh Allen is still going to put up very good yard or fantasy points because he's Josh Allen. He's one of the
Yeah.
very best quarterbacks in the league. In our power rankings, he's number 3.
Hmm.
And one of the questions that we've said is, can he be a multiplier like Mahomes when he doesn't have the talent around him? This is going to be the year that we really find that out. Coleman, he's a second round receiver. Doesn't matter if he was the 33rd pick in the draft, he's still second round.
Yep.
And again, we're just going to have to see with Josh Allen if he can be that multiplier to get the guys that are around him and get them better, like what we've seen from Mahomes, like what we've seen from Joe Burrow. And it's going to be interesting to see. And so I would say if you are going to be someone who's going to pick a quarterback first, not first overall, not first round, but the first person to take a quarterback, and you see Josh Allen's name popping up on the screen, I would suggest heavy caution because his numbers are likely going to drop off significantly. Like last year, he had 392.64 fantasy points with just some phenomenal numbers. Again, the interceptions are what the interceptions are, but they're saying that he goes from almost 400 to just a little over 300 fantasy points. Again, 300 fantasy points is still pretty damn good for
Hmm.
just your quarterback alone. I think he's probably going to be under that 300 point mark just because, again, all the players around him, but he's still going to be a very, very good quarterback to have. And let's say you
Well,
go
yeah.
out there and draft a Caleb Williams or a CJ Stroud and you see Josh Allen there a couple rounds later, pick him up in like the 7th, 8th, 9th, and beyond for sure. But yeah, heavy caution.
Yeah, exactly. He's still going to have those numbers on the ground. I fully expect to see him break 1,000 yards rushing this year because he's going to have to do a lot more with his legs. And that 15 touchdowns he got last year, I think that's likely doable again for him. But yeah, those passing yards and the passing touchdowns are going to, definitely take a drop off. And as a result, I think his passing interceptions could actually increase even, which says a lot because he had a lot last year, like
18.
24, I think. Hmm?
He had 18 passing or
18? Oh, okay. I thought it was
interceptions.
over 20.
I
But yeah,
Yeah, not quite that high, but yeah, it's
okay.
still throwing
It
18
still wasn't great.
interceptions. He's
Yeah.
essentially throwing one every single game. So
Yeah.
you're going to be losing 6 points basically every single game with Josh Allen in terms of the
Hmm.
fantasy aspect because he is going to throw that interception. And, you know, you just gotta hope that he's not having a game where it's going to be 4 interceptions in just one, because you're probably going to be closer in the negative more than
Yeah.
anything. And the defenses in, the AFC East aren't necessarily world beaters by any means, but he's going to have to go up against the Jets twice a year.
Hmm.
Gerard Mayo with the Patriots, he's going to make sure that defense is a lot better, and they're going to have their first round pick from last year, the kid out of Oregon who was really good as a corner. Miami, I mean, they have Jalen Ramsey
Right?
this,
You never know. He could
so
reemerge at any time.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, as you were saying though, definitely uh, temper yourself if you see Josh Allen early because he's high on the ADP list for some reason. He should not be going in the second round. I don't think he should be going anywhere before the sixth round myself. Um,
he should
and
not be your
you know,
first quarterback in the
no,
draft.
you've got him at 7, and I actually have had him drop all the way to my 8th spot. That is where I had Josh Allen fall all the way to.
Yeah. He's still a very, very talented quarterback. It's just on our
He
rankings, he has to fall.
Right, he'll be excellent for you as a QB2 if you've got a two quarterback league. He'll be excellent for you as your reserve quarterback in for that bye week or any mismatchups that you have. If you can find good matchups for Josh Allen, you can plug him in maybe 4 or 5 weeks throughout the season, and he will be able to get you some good numbers. It's going to be a gamble of, as you pointed out, is this going to be his one interception game or is this going to be his 4 interception game? That's what you need to watch out for.
Yeah. And the problem is that you just don't know which week you're going to get out of him.
No,
It's
no,
always a mystery. Your next
right?
quarterback, sir.
My next quarterback, that is where I had, or well, who did you have at number 8? Because that's where Josh Allen fell for me, was to number 8.
I had Jordan Love from the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jordan Love, every Bears fan doesn't want to admit that he's good. I'll be the
Hmm.
first to go out there and say, you know what? I really dislike the fact of how good he was this year in his first year of full time playing, and he didn't have superstar talent around him to throw the ball to. And granted, they really didn't do much in terms of the adding weapons this off season. So, but they did get potentially a little bit stronger at the offensive line. They got stronger on the defense for sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, Jordan Love again. I'll just read some of the stats that we saw from Jordan Love in his first year of play. He threw for 4,159 yards, 32 TDs, 11 interceptions, 247 rushing yards with 4 rushing touchdowns. Um, do I expect him to have another 30 plus passing touchdowns season? Probably not, just because I think defenses are going to be a little bit more up to date with what to do to kind of slow him down. But I still think, unless it was just the flukiest season that we've seen from a quarterback, he's still going to put up decent numbers. I think 27, 28 passing touchdowns likely. Unfortunately, I think the interceptions are probably going to be single digits. I think having that year of full-time playing experience is probably going to get him to be a little bit better protecting the ball. Again, he doesn't really add much in the terms of the rushing game, so I'm not really worried about how much he's going to add in that department, how many touchdowns, but I think his numbers are going to drop from what we've seen last year, but he's still going to be a very good statistical quarterback. And one of those guys, again, if you have the two quarterback team, he could be one of those guys where, for instance, if you lose out on the CJ Strouds, the all the other guys that we mentioned, the Caleb Williams, Mahomes, blah 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 blah, and you see him there, and you need a quarterback on your team, he's one of those guys that I feel fairly comfortable going up and getting. I will never draft Jordan Love. Jordan Love
No,
will never be on my team.
no.
That is for personal, deep rooted, hated for the Green Bay Packers and all of their players. He'll never be on my team ever, even if he somehow goes up to be the number one quarterback. And at that point, I'll have bigger issues in my life. But yeah, so you
See,
know,
I have less of a problem with that, as you know, since I drafted Joe Burrow last year. As much as I hate the Bengals, for me, I was looking at it going, I want to win a champion. So I had to do it. And yeah, I mean, Jordan Love, he's pretty high up on the ADP in my opinion. I was hoping he would be lower just because I was looking at him as hopefully being able to take him as a bit of a sleeper. I wanted to somehow try and pair Caleb Williams and Jordan Love as my quarterback duo just because that would exactly create that look on your face every time. And so that's why I wanted to do that. I
You're a
don't have Jordan
sick
Love.
person.
I am
You're
a
a
sick person.
sick. You're a sick individual.
Right?
Ugh.
Especially when you see me like shift them and put Jordan Love QB1 and Caleb Williams QB2 just to upset you. I'll only do that on the weeks when we're playing each other.
You're you.
Yeah.
You need therapy. um. Yeah. Jordan Love. His ADP is 54, so they're talking about him being like a fifth round pick, and we're always going to be
60.
basing. Would that be, yeah, sixth
Yeah.
round, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're always going to base these off 10-man leagues.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's potentially too high for him. I view him more as someone kind of you're viewing to go after in like round 10
Yeah.
type.
Yeah, I've got him as high as maybe round 8,
Yeah,
and that's sort of only if you've filled out
you
adequately your
haven't
wide
gotten a
receiver and your
quarterback
running back.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah. But Jordan Love, he has the capability to be a fringe QB1. He's definitely a QB2 though.
Oh, with if you can
Yeah.
manage to get him as your second quarterback on the list, you're
Yeah.
probably doing something pretty all right. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, moving over next at number 9, this is where I had Lamar Jackson fall down to for myself. And that was just because I think with the addition of his run game support and then the subtraction of the receivers that he's got, we're gonna see a drop off from Lamar Jackson this year, much like Josh Allen. So that's why I had both him and Allen drop almost to the bottom of my top 10.
yeah,
So
and
I had
we talked about Lamar Jackson beforehand, and it's pretty much just both of our reasonings are legitimate,
yeah,
and there could be a situation where you're in the fourth round and you say fuck it, I just have to pick Lamar because he is going to be this. But
yep,
yeah, it is a situation where we could see him drop in this. I don't think he will in terms of our league, just because
no,
he is that type of player. But yeah, moving forward, your 10th quarterback, my good sir.
yeah. Who did you have at 9?
Jordan Love. Or no, I had to. I hate when I do spreadsheets because I have my quarterbacks rated in the first category and then it goes everything down. So I'm looking at going like, oh, Kyler Murray was my 9th quarterback in this
Okay.
one. Getting Marvin Harrison Jr. is
Hmm.
massive for Kyler Murray, and we talk about Kyler Murray in the sense of he's also a mobile quarterback. I feel like since we've seen, obviously Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Fields kind of take those are the three big guys that we talk about being the mobile quarterbacks. And Kyler Murray is kind of almost forgotten about in that sense. Granted, he was injured for most of last year, so
Yes.
no one was even touching him with a 10-foot pole because why would you
Hmm.
wait till week 13 for a guy to be a quarterback on your team just to have him injury reserved? You might as well leave
Great
him
in
as a
time for
free.
playoff, right?
Exactly. Well, it just that even that playoff push type situation, those last few
Yeah.
weeks before that, it just wasn't really worth it. But having Marvin Harrison Jr. there, who we know is going to be one of those wide receivers, he's going to be the first rookie wide receiver picked up.
Hmm.
And I know I've seen him be as high as the 5th wide receiver in some people's drafts. But I feel like Kyler Murray, when I look at his ADP in this particular one, he's being talked about as 68, so kind of that 7th round territory. I feel like
Hmm.
that's a pretty good range for him to go. Trey McBride was spectacular last year, even without Kyler Murray. He's going into his 3rd year in the pros. Again, with Murray, it's going to be the upside of the upgrading in the passing department, but also the running department for me.
Yeah, he's a big scrambler for sure. I didn't quite have him that high. I have Kyler Murray at my 11th rated quarterback, but yeah, he is definitely one that if he's there, in the 7th to 10th rounds, I would definitely be picking him up because we saw even after that knee surgery, he still has that escapability, those great mobility um, options, and he's able to just extend plays and then still run it upfield after extending that play if nothing opens up. And having Marvin Harrison Jr., that's going to give him that opportunity to go, oh, well, I can run around back here for a bit. And oh, look, now Marvin is open. I'm going to sling it downfield. And so I think Kyler Murray is going to have a great year this year. He was just forgotten last year due to that injury, and then all the rumors of will they trade him away, will they
Will they
keep
look for a
him,
quarterback situation?
right?
Yeah.
And so, ultimately, Kyler Murray is going to have a big bounce back year this year. He's just outside my top 10, but he was a fringe top 10 for me. I
Yeah.
sort of had to shuffle him around a bit. He ended up landing outside of it.
I think another reason why he's also going to be so good, and we've seen this before, is because, and I know we like to joke about height with quarterback, but Kyler Murray, he can almost get lost in the
Yep.
fray of situations because guys are used to basically looking at eye level and going like, okay, here's the quarterback. Most quarterbacks in the league are 6'2" and above. So it's
Hmm.
easy. And Kyler Murray being 5'11", again, these most of the NFL guys are not going to be able to miss him, but he can have that little bit of like, oh, like, where the hell
Sneaky.
is he? Yeah, he
Yep.
has he has that slight sneakiness to just kind of go like, oh, and like, damn it, like I thought he was right
Right.
here and he's in the end zone right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
100% for sure. And so now to round out our top 10, who have you got in your 10th spot?
I have Aaron Rodgers. I
Oh,
could not leave Aaron Rodgers farther down on this list. We talked about the QB power rankings, and where we
mhm,
had Aaron Rodgers on this particular list was 14. I know you had him a little bit higher, I had him a little bit lower, and then we compromised to bring him to this particular point. But we know what Aaron Rodgers is. He is
yeah.
older, but throwing to Garrett Wilson is going to be massive. He has some more
Mhm,
offensive line up in front of him. Brees Hall, we know, is kind of very similar to Jameer Gibbs, a little bit of a Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift type back. And Brees Hall was I think he was the highest point getter in the entire NFL last year. And with Aaron Rodgers being there, and we just know that Rodgers just doesn't really make those mistakes
mhm,
of finding open guys. And I said it last year and I'll say it again this year. Him and Garrett Wilson are going to be a very lethal duo.
yep.
And when you have a duo like that, it makes it very hard to look at that quarterback and go like, damn. Like, I'm not saying you pair them up on your fantasy team, but if you can at least get one of them, I think
Yeah.
you're going to be in a pretty good spot. Rodgers, he's not going to wow you in terms of the rushing department. I
No, he's too old for that.
and even then when he was younger, you didn't really see the big rushing yards. He would do similar to what we see from Mahomes and
Mhm,
Caleb Williams coming in, where he's moving around behind the line of scrimmage trying to find an open guy. And then he does have some of the ability to get upfield if it's more open. But yeah, with him, I just think he's going to have a big year with Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall.
mhm.
And I forget some of the other weapons that they also have there. But it's one of those things where I still think he's going to do a very serviceable, bang up job where he is. I think he's going to put up more numbers, and just looking at where he is on the average chart here, just going down, he is the 20th rated quarterback for ADP
Yep.
at 111. So this is one of those guys where I think might be someone that, if, for instance, a bunch of those guys that we've already mentioned have gone off, he could easily be your number one quarterback. But if you can get him as your number two, you are laughing.
Yeah. He fell off a lot farther for me. Just because outside of Garrett Wilson and the few dump offs to Brees Hall, I don't see him putting up a ton of stats. He's gonna have good touchdown numbers. He's gonna have good passing yards. I don't, and he'll protect the ball well. So,
Yep.
like for me, I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers more as being like a fringe QB2, possibly my QB3 if it comes to that. I have him all the way down at 19 on my list. Uh, for number 10 for me is the other repaired Achilles, and that is Kirk
Kirk
Cousins,
Cousins. Yeah.
because he has a lot more weapons available to him in Atlanta. And I think we could see him have a more pronounced bounce back sort of year. You know, he's got all these weapons around him, a completely new coaching staff there in Atlanta as well, that I think is going to cater to his passing ability.
Yeah. I have Kirk Cousins a little bit lower on my list. He's not too far. He is actually one pick behind. He's my 12th rated quarterback as opposed to my
Yeah,
11th or 10th, whatever we
we're
are
on 10.
on. Yeah, so he's 2 picks behind. But yeah, with Kirk Cousins, he is a solid option. Um Again, there's no fault from him with what the Falcons did over the offseason in their draft. Like, he went in there basically being told with the contract that he signed that he's going to be the number one quarterback until he decides to no longer be the number one quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still interested to see what their offensive situation is going to be, because I know their head coach, brand new, he's a defensive minded guy, and we all know my feeling of defensive minded head coaches,
Yep.
especially when they're more unproven and you don't know what the offense is going to look like. So that's kind of why I have Kirk Cousins a little bit lower. And I will say this, the weapons that he had in Minnesota versus the weapons that he has now with the Falcons is a downgrade in every respect. I think
Yep.
the only upgrade that he's getting from Minnesota to Atlanta is the running back position in Bijan Robinson and Tyler
Mm-hmm.
Algier. I don't think even with Dalvin Cook it was ever comparable, but the fact
Nope.
that the last few years he had Justin Jefferson, and last year he had Jordan Addison with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. You look at Drake London. Drake London's a damn good receiver. He's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere close to a Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison, I would say, is probably comparable to Drake London, not in play style, but in terms of, their fantasy point levels and type stuff.
Yep.
You know, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is one of the biggest wonders in terms of fantasy football, because theoretically he should be tight end number one every single year ever since
Yep.
entering the league. Was that simply Arthur Smith, or was that what we've seen, or is that just what Kyle Pitts is? It's hard to know, and that's why I have him a little bit lower. But yeah, I
That's fair.
he is still a very good quarterback, and he's not going to get you any numbers in terms of rushing. It's just going to be
No.
pure pocket passing, but
Yeah.
we've seen it get done
But
before.
well, exactly, and I think he'll be good at protecting the ball, so you're not going to see a ton of interceptions from him either. Um, I just, like I said, I feel like he's got a few more weapons around him as opposed to what Aaron Rodgers has, so that's why I think he will be the better one at that point.
Yeah, but both of those guys are kind of in similar situations. Again, we might look at Cousins as having a little bit more. I think a lot of people forget that Mike Williams is a Jet, and Mike
Yep,
Williams is a damn good receiver. It's just
when he can stay healthy.
when he can stay healthy, but when he is healthy, he's damn good.
Yep.
But now he's also going to be the number 2 behind Garrett Wilson, so that's probably going to take a little bit more of the pressure off. We talked about how he's the number 2 behind Keenan Allen, but Keenan
Yeah.
Allen was playing a different role than what Mike Williams was. But for me, my number 11 quarterback was Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is currently being looked at in the top 10 for ADP. He's 53 on the ADP chart.
Hmm.
I don't love that value for him. He's one of those guys where we could potentially talk about him being in that CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams conversation for if you're in your keeper league. But I would say this with him: if you are going to take him, you need to be very, very cautious, because when he is healthy, he can
Hmm.
be a Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields type player in terms of the rushing with the passing numbers. And I think the receivers and the weapons that they have there in Indianapolis are very capable of him being a good passer. But the fact that he had 2 injuries in 4 weeks, and the second injury cost him the rest of his rookie season, you better hope that his bone, like he drank nothing but milk and just got as healthy as he possibly can, because if you draft him as your number one quarterback and he goes down for the season week 4,
Hmm.
like what's the point? You might as well just draft Deshaun Watson at that point, because you're probably going to get more fantasy point numbers out of him than you would Anthony Richardson. So I'm saying with this guy, he is without a doubt a player that you need to be extremely cautious with.
Yes.
Myself, I am completely steering away from Anthony Richardson because of the injuries.
Hmm.
Like, again, if we were simply doing just a one-off year, again, like what we did last year, I would say I would be completely fine losing out on Anthony Richardson this year and then worrying about it next year. But since
Yeah.
we are doing a keeper league, it's one of those things where I might take a flyer on him if he's my QB2 and it's a lot farther down the list, like maybe in rounds like 15 and beyond. He's not going to be there because there's going to be someone that just looks at that and goes, the value is going to be too good to pass up on. But he is someone that you should look at, but
Yeah.
you need to have extreme caution on.
Yeah, and I mean for myself, everything you said about the injury concerns and everything, that's why Anthony Richardson isn't even on my list. Like, yes, he's high up on the ADP, but those concerns for me are too much to take him as a QB1 or 2. He's the type of guy in a keeper league, I would take him as my QB3 just because, hey, if he does stay healthy this year, I've got a solid starter next year.
Yeah, and if you're in
Yeah,
a league where you have 2 starting quarterbacks per week, I could
yeah.
definitely see Anthony Richardson being someone that you definitely want to have in that rotation, because you
Hmm.
might be looking at it going like, oh, this team that they're facing off against is really bad at dealing with mobile quarterbacks, and so
Yeah.
you might go down that route. But
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I don't even have Richardson on my list. And as we discussed earlier, Kyler Murray was my number 11. So moving over to number 12, this is where I had Dak Prescott fall to. I still expect Dak Prescott to be able to put up decent numbers. He's still got CD Lamb there, still got Jake Ferguson. He's going to be that middle of the road quarterback. He's going to be a fringe QB1. He's going to be definitely a QB2 for you. They've got him projected early 7th round. Um, I probably wouldn't take him any earlier than the 9th round myself. But yeah, Dak Prescott, you know what you're going to get with him. He is a solid, consistent quarterback. I think he's possibly got the ability to do a little bit more this year, just to stick it to Jerry Jones and go, hey, now you really got to pay me or I'm just walking.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dak is my 15th quarterback on the list, and I know a lot of people are probably have been listening, going like, "When are you going to mention Dak? When are you going to mention Dak?" I've seen him
Mhm.
very high up in some lists before, but for me, the biggest thing with Dak is he just doesn't really have anyone to throw the ball to other than CD Lamb. And I think
Yeah.
CD Lamb really broke out last year, and there's a lot of people talking about CD Lamb potentially being the first overall pick in a lot of fantasy leagues, if not the first wide receiver. I just look at it and go, they didn't add anyone else for CD Lamb to have anyone to really take the ball away from him. I know they didn't have anyone like that last year other than Brandon Cooks, but I think
Mhm.
more teams are just going to go, we're going to force you to beat us with Ezekiel Elliott
Yeah.
and Brandon Cooks as opposed to CD Lamb. And I'm just a little bit worried that Dak is only going to be able to throw the ball to essentially one
Yeah.
individual player to get really his points. And his numbers last year were very, very good. 36
Hmm.
passing touchdowns, the 9 interceptions, the 4,500 yards. I just think we're gonna see a drop off this year.
Yeah.
He's still going to be a damn good quarterback, and we have him as our 6th rated quarterback in power rankings. But yeah, I just go, this is someone that I would love to have as my QB2 in a room.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely not a QB1 for me.
No. And so who do you have at number 12 then?
12 was Kirk Cousins for me.
12 was Kirk Cousins for you. So then moving over to 13, that is where I had Jordan Love for myself, was at 13. And all the points you were making about him, I completely agree with. I only had him a little lower just because of the division he's playing in. I
It's a
think
tough
he's going to
division.
have a bit of struggles up against that Lions defense now and the Bears defense, especially. So it's,
Yeah.
but he is definitely somebody I'm looking at very strongly for my QB2 position.
Yeah. For me, I had Caleb Williams at 13.
Yeah.
At 14, I had Jared Goff. We already talked about him. So who do you have as your 14th
My
quarterback?
14, that's where I had Tua Tagovailoa land. I still think he's a top 20 quarterback. I still think he should be in your rotation in a two quarterback league. He's definitely entrenched as a QB2 though. And if you have better options, having him as your flyer bench QB3 would be preferable to me. They've got him ADP at 96 right now, so 10th round pick. And honestly, if you've got a quarterback already by the 10th round and he's sitting there and you don't have an excellent flex or tight end option, Tua could be a serviceable option. You still have, I do believe, Tyreek Hill there for him to throw the ball to.
Yep.
And so, every time Tyreek Hill goes for 65-yard touchdown pass, that's going to be padding that to his stats there. So yeah, Tua Tagovailoa for me is 14. It's not much risk reward for him. I think he's going to have a similar season this year to last year. Having him right around that number 100 in ADP makes sense for me as well. So,
Yeah, Tua, he's a little bit lower on my list. He is my 17th rated guy.
yep.
But yeah, again, with Tua, he was one of the quarterbacks that I ultimately had last year, and there was games where he put up really good numbers for you, mostly because of essentially what Tyreek Hill was doing. But then there
Yep.
was other games where he was just kind of middle of the road quarterback, and so that's why both of us kind of have him down this road, is just because there's going to be games where he's going to win you your week, but then there's also going to be weeks where he's going to lose it because he's just middle of the pack type guy. But yeah, for me, I had Jared Goff at my 14th spot, and
Okay. And so then moving over to number 15, who have you got sitting at
I
15?
I had Dak.
That's where you had Dak.
Yeah,
For 15, myself, I had Trevor Lawrence. Um, I still think we should be seeing good things from Trevor Lawrence. Last year they started out hot. He was putting up good numbers, and then that injury train started hitting that team, and it was one guy after the other going down. And I think that's really what hindered them. If they can stay healthy, yes, he lost Calvin Ridley, but they did add
Brian Thompson.
Brian Thompson, which excellent wide receiver out of LSU, I do believe. He was the guy that I was looking at my Pittsburgh Steelers picking up, which would have been
He
a good
was the
addition.
fourth best wide receiver in the
Yeah,
draft, and it wasn't
yeah.
close.
No, and so that is a good addition, good pickup. If ETN can stay healthy for them to round out that run game, I do think Trevor Lawrence is firmly entrenched as a QB2. If he can put it all together, he should be in that QB1 conversation. He just hasn't been able to do that for me yet. And so QB2 for sure. If you can get him as your third or as your bench, your filling guy, excellent grab to have as a fill in.
Yeah, Trevor for me, he's my 19th quarterback just because we talk about Trevor Lawrence. He's been a good quarterback in the NFL. His first year,
Yep.
we write that one off because of Urban Meyer and all the
Yep.
stuff that happened there. In year number two, he showed us what he should have showed us in his rookie year. This year, we were kind of hoping that we would see him take that step from being good to being great, and that we could be having the conversation this year of him going from being great to being elite. Um, but yeah, again, the injuries were a thing last year, and so for me, I'm just a little bit worried that if adversity starts to hit this team, which it does for every single team, how is he going to be able to elevate his team? And what we saw last year was he wasn't able to. And whether that was from injuries, this, that, or the other thing, Again, I just have him a little bit lower, and he's going to be one of those guys where it's going to be an interesting case throughout the entire season to watch, because he is going to put up decent numbers week in,
Yep.
week out. It's just, can he be justifiable to be your starting quarterback every single week, or is he just kind of like a bye week quarterback, or he's kind of like a little bit of, game matchup type guy,
Yeah.
and so it's going to be interesting to watch.
Definitely. Definitely. That's why I've got him where I do. Like, he's definitely a QB2, somebody that you can use to fill in for those bye weeks and to keep an eye on. I mean, he's still somebody that is worth looking at for a later pick in a keeper league, because he's still very young.
Yep.
And if this Jags organization can get all their ducks lined up and start putting like, we look at the first 6 weeks last year, the Jags were arguably the best team in the league. And if
Yeah,
they could have kept that going, we could have been talking about Jags and Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
without a doubt.
So that's just it. It's, can they handle that adversity? Can they stay healthy this time?
Yeah. And with Trevor Lawrence, his numbers from last year, just 4,016 yards, the
Yep.
21 TDs, the 14 interceptions. So, again, he does need to clean up the
Hmm.
interceptions. And same thing with Tua as well. He had 14 interceptions. So you kind of look at these two guys and go, the numbers are good, but they kind of also get canceled out some weeks by their
Sometimes, yeah,
interceptions.
definitely.
Yeah. So your 16th quarterback, my good sir.
Uh, 16 is where I had Matthew Stafford land for myself. And he's quite low on the ADP, sitting at 112. So they're looking at him going 12th round. And honestly, I would take him higher than that. If you've got your lineup set by round 12 and Matt Stafford is there and you need a backup quarterback, grab
He's
him,
very
because
good.
that Rams offense is going to be fire. They got Blake Corum, Kyron Williams, Puka Nakua, Cooper Cup. Like, it's
A lot of
so
firepower.
stacked,
Yeah.
so stacked. And with Matt Stafford, all he has to do is get the ball out of his hands and not make mistakes, and he will have phenomenal numbers for you in that QB2 position.
And I agree with everything that you say there. And I know exactly why Matthew Stafford is both low on our list and low on multiple people's lists.
Yep.
The concern with
Old.
injury.
Yeah, he's
With
old.
he's old, but also the concern of injury, because it seems like with Matthew Stafford, he will have a year of where he will have a bad injury, and then for the next year he's still kind of dealing with some stuff, and then the year after he's a lot better, or he gets right back into that injury history, and you just don't know what you're getting with Matthew Stafford year in year out, because the year that he was first with the Rams and he went to the Super Bowl, he was amazing. The year
Yep.
after that, hurt. Last year, he was good, but he also had some injury troubles in that part of the year, and
It
it
was
was
more, yeah, it was more still recovering from that injury too. And that's sort of what I think. You look at that Matt Stafford cycle, and it's great year, injury year, recovery year, great year is often the way he goes. It's that 3-year cycle. And so if he sticks with that cycle, this could be a great year.
yeah, but we've always seen that when he's younger though, and so
Yes,
it's again, I'd
but
look at him if he is there, like what you were saying in
mhm.
the 12th round. Totally agree,
Oh
totally
yeah.
100% comfortable with picking him up, because again, the weapons that are there is going to
Mhm.
be great, and also we talked about Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan. He has Sean McVay, who
Exactly.
without a doubt is the third best offensive mind in football, and
Yep.
is like, I would say he's a Hall of Fame coach just from what we've seen over his very short career, just because of the effect that he's had on the league.
Yep.
Next up for me in my 16th spot, I had Jaden Daniels, the rookie quarterback for the Commanders. We talk about Caleb Williams and the situation that he's was put into. Jaden Daniels is also put into a decent situation with the weapons that he is throwing the ball to.
Yep.
Terry McLaurin is a damn good wide receiver. Jahan Dotson is a good number two receiver. I don't think he's maybe the best number two wide receiver, but he's young and talented. Brian Robinson Jr. is a decent running back. The O line is going to be the thing that is the biggest struggle on
Hmm.
this particular team. Um, but yeah, I think also adding in the rushing numbers for him he probably should be a little bit higher on this list just because he is going to be able to put up decent numbers in the passing game and with the running game. My worry with Jaden Daniels is that he has a Justin Fields rookie year where he just can't get the ball moving anything more than this and that. But you know, in a keeper league, he might be someone that you look at just because he is a rookie quarterback. But this is one of those moves where if you have yourself, let's say, like a Patrick Mahomes or one of those top guys, and you've just said, oh shit, I need a backup quarterback, Jaden Daniels is there, might as well pick him up because he could potentially be something. We saw what Robert Griffin III was in his
Mhm.
rookie year, and there's a lot more similarities to Robert Griffin and Jaden Daniels than I think a lot of people are giving credit to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even have Jaden Daniels on my list. My concern with him is more Anthony Richardson concern.
Yeah,
Yeah, if Jaden Daniels stays healthy all season, he's going to put up great numbers. Look at what Sam Howell put up. They're
yeah,
going to be it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be garbage numbers. It's not going to be game-winning numbers, but it's going to be a lot of fantasy stats. Sam Howell put up excellent numbers in the fourth quarter last year because his team was playing from so far behind. They're like, let's just go for it.
yeah. It was garbage time
Um,
numbers.
but it's can he stay healthy for the entire season?
Yeah,
Jaden Daniels, I could see him starting out quite strong and then all of a sudden taking an injury and then he's done for the year.
yeah.
So that's
It's
where
a
my
weird
concern
thing
is
with
with him.
Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels. I look at this from the standpoint of he's gonna like I think he's gonna stay healthy for the entire year, and if he can, he should put up decent numbers. And
Yeah.
at this point, anything past like 15, like after the top 15 quarterbacks, you are really grasping at straws, in my opinion. You're just kind of throwing more of the hope train, as it
Yeah.
would be. But yeah, your 18th or your 17th quarterback.
17, I have Baker Mayfield. He's in an excellent situation staying with Tampa Bay. He's still got his receivers there. He had a good season last year. I think he's just going to build on that. Baker Mayfield is solidly entrenched for me as a QB2 if in a two quarterback league, or he should be a guy you grab for your bye covering quarterback.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't have Baker Mayfield on the top 20 list just because I think some of the other guys still on this list that I have, again, for me, I have Tua at 17, Stafford at 18, and Trevor Lawrence at 19. Those are my next three quarterbacks, and
Yep.
like we've talked about, we've already had them on your list higher up. And
Yep.
the one quarterback that I still have on the list is a guy that I have in the top five for power rankings, and
Okay.
it's just we'll obviously get to that for number
Yep.
20. And for me, Baker is just on that outside. He's kind of that honorable mention for me.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, and so I mean, um, as you know, I had Aaron Rodgers at 19, so we'll be able to skip right over 19 when we get there. 18 is a guy that I assume you have at number 20. Someone we haven't talked about yet because he doesn't really have weapons. We don't know what he's going to be able to do this year. That's Justin Herbert.
Yeah, Justin
I
Herbert was
couldn't
my number
leave
20.
Justin Herbert off this list because he is such a good quarterback. But what's he going to be able to do without Keenan Allen, without Austin Eckler, without Mike Williams? We don't know. And so that this is one of those picks where it's like he could be really good for you, but he could be a complete bust this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is what Justin Herbert's receiving room at the moment looks like. His number one receiver is Quentin Johnston, who was
Oh,
terrible.
yeah.
Like, I will never label a player after year number one as a bust. I think you cannot judge, because if you look at what Jared Goff was in his rookie year, everyone said he was a bust. Now look at Jared Goff. Look at him
Right?
the year after. Joshua Palmer, who has never really done much. And then in the second round, they did draft Lad McConkey,
Mhm.
who is a
Yep.
damn good wide receiver, but he's a rookie, still a second round guy. So we need to see. They also drafted Brendan Rice in the
Hmm.
seventh round. I think they got a hell of a steal in that one. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of question marks. They have DJ Shark there as well. So
Yep.
that's why I have Justin Herbert as 20, because there's just a lot of unproven, but the offensive line is a hell of a lot better this
Yep.
particular season, so he's going to have a lot more time to throw. We know what Justin Herbert is like. He's still a top 5 quarterback in the entire NFL, so
Yep. We just don't know what he's going to be able to do fantasy point wise. That's why
yeah,
he's so low on both of our lists.
yeah, it's hard to know if he's going to be able to put up anything more
Yeah.
than 15 fantasy points a week.
Yeah.
And he's going to have some weeks where he's going to be brilliant and he's
Oh,
going to
for
put up
sure.
like 30 points, but yeah, hoping that you're going to have that more than once or twice a year is really wishful thinking,
It
unfortunately.
is. Yeah. And so I believe that rounds out your list. You don't have any other guys.
Yeah, everyone else you have already
Everyone.
mentioned and we've talked about, but yeah, so
Well,
for you.
then the only one I have left is my number 20 spot, and I have Geno Smith at number 20. And again, like some of the others we mentioned, that's purely based on the weapons he has.
Yep.
You know, you have DK Metcalf, you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, you still have Tyler Lockett there. And if Kenneth Murray can stay healthy, he should be one of the best running backs in the league. And so I see no reason why Geno Smith can't continue this late stage emergence in his career and put up serviceable, consistent fantasy numbers. That's what I expect out of him is he will be a consistent producer for you in your QB2 spot or as a fringe quarterback 3.
Yeah, again, similar for me with Baker Mayfield. This is a guy
Yeah.
that is an honorable mention. The big problem that I'm gonna have with Geno Smith this year is defensive head coach who's a rookie and kind of bringing in his offensive coordinator. And Geno did take a big step back last year, so I'm not saying that Geno that first year with the Seahawks as the starter was a fluke, but it was
Yeah.
definitely a situation where you looked at that and went, okay, that was definitely more just kind of that coming out season, and we're probably not going to be able to replicate that. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of those guys where if you need like a QB2, or you're one of those crazy people like myself that potentially even has a QB3 on your team that you like to throw into the rotation and you could use as a depending matchup type guy, like for
Yeah.
instance, let's say the Seahawks go up against one of the worst pass defenses in the league, you're going to want to have Geno Smith out there because he is going
Mhm.
to be able to put up some decent, or you would expect him to put up some decent numbers with the weapons that he has there. And Noah Fant has the tight end, is also a really good receiving threat. So yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of rounds out our top 20, for your quarterback picks in the fantasy football, do with that what you will. There were some in there, as we mentioned early on, your Josh Allens, your Jalen Hurts, your Patrick Mahomes, their ADP is going to have them showing up on your list as early as the second round. Definitely consider going other places. You're going to get a lot more fantasy point value out of your wide receiver positions and even your running backs before your quarterbacks. That's why a lot of people will say they don't like taking quarterbacks before the fourth round. For Brendon and I, often it's closer to the fifth or sixth round most times, because we like to have all of our starters set in that wide receiver and running back room. But hey, I mean, you do you. We've seen guys take quarterbacks in the first round, as Brendan mentioned last year. Every single round, we had a quarterback go in our fantasy.
Yeah, just like that was just absolute nonsense in that draft.
Yeah.
We had Patrick Mahomes go first overall, which again we mentioned at the opening
Hmm.
part of the podcast, where TJ, again, he was late showing up to the draft, and so he had the first pick, and it auto drafted Mahomes for him. We're still gonna make fun of him and go, "How the hell did you draft
Yep.
Mahomes first overall?" But then we had Will select Josh Allen in the second round, which I think you and I were like, okay, like TJ did whatever the hell he did because we didn't know that was an auto draft, but we kind of looked at Will at that point and went like, what the hell? Like
Yeah.
why?
And the
Uh,
fact that he was able to do that and still make it to the championship with me.
yeah, well, he had himself a good team. Like, don't get me
Yep.
wrong. Like, he made some smart moves, but again, Aiden O'Connell not being able to hit Devonte
Yep.
Adams 3 times. Like,
Yep.
I know I talked about this last week, but all Aiden O'Connell needed to do on Christmas Eve was to hit Devontae Adams for 3 catches. Devontae Adams could have had 1 yard in that game with 3 catches, and it would have been you and I.
Yep.
You want to know how many targets Devontae Adams had in that game? He had 7.
You mentioned it last week.
He had 7. He caught 1 pass because Aiden O'Connell couldn't learn how to hit an open receiver. Flip table.
Yep. The downside to having to rely on Aiden O'Connell.
But now they have Gardner Minshew, who is going to be able to hit a target. But yeah, next week is going to be another fun week of fantasy talk. Again, we'll probably start the podcast typically like we normally do, just doing some bullshit, or just chatting some bullshit, things that we hear and things that we want to make fun of. And then we'll jump right in next week, running backs. So this is a very, very big portion of fantasy football. And that one's going to be a really good conversation.
Definitely.
But till then, for Sterling, I'm Brendon. We are the 1IQ Football Talk podcast saying peace.